Hola, bienvenidos a este Hangout de Impulsa Colombia con un invitado muy especial. Tenemos hoy a Jeff Gómez, que vino para participar en el Héroes Fest y nos regala este rato para conversar con toda nuestra comunidad de Impulsa Colombia. Acaba de hacer una presentación fantástica sobre cómo podemos cambiar el futuro de Colombia aprovechando muchas técnicas y métodos de Transmedia, y yo quiero empezar por preguntarle qué es esto de Transmedia y eso cómo nos puede ayudar a nosotros en el propósito de fortalecer una cultura o fortalecer un ecosistema de innovación y emprendimiento en Colombia. So Jeff, the first question that welcome and thank you for being here.
Fantastic.
And the first thing that we would like to know is what is Transmedia and how can this be useful at all to change the culture or even to create, to strengthen our ecosystem of innovation and entrepreneurship in Colombia?
Well, transmedia storytelling is a technique to convey messages, themes, or storylines, narrative, to a mass audience through the artful and well-planned use of multiple media platforms. Okay, so it's a technique that makes story jump from one medium to the next, because today we have a generation growing up that uses one medium and another and another and another without even thinking about it. Okay, so I recognize the need for transmedia storytelling because the content that we were experiencing was not doing that. It stayed in one medium, and it's not as useful to us. The content needs to follow the person. So if we can design our stories so that they play well on different media, then you're going to have a more effective story.
And why are stories so important for culture?
Well, besides actually experiencing it, which can be dangerous, you go out with into life and you don't have any experience, that could be harmful. It helps to be educated, to be taught. The best teaching methodology proven by science is narrative. Tell me a story and I am emotionally engaged in your narrative, and what I'm really doing is learning about everything. It goes back to mythology. It goes back to the narratives that shaman used to inform the tribe about the dangers of the outside world. So it's still hardwired in our head that story is education.
Why is this useful for the entrepreneurship and innovation ecosystem in Colombia?
We have seen that using multi-platform narrative is extremely effective for movies and television shows and video games. It's something that makes us want to return to the world of the story again and again. More recently, we learned that multi-platform narrative is very effective in advertising and marketing. Companies like Coca-Cola are using story and surrounding the consumer with information and ideas and concepts that make them engage with the brand. Why not apply these techniques to generate social action? We are in the process of proving that whole populations can be activated with story. We know that television shows have inspired people to talk about complex issues like racism or teen pregnancy or homosexuality. Now, what about using a story to make us aware of social issues, but across multiple platforms? Even if they are hot button, difficult issues, when you use transmedia techniques, you are engaging the people not just with story, but with dialogue. You are listening to them and they are expressing themselves to you.
You have looked into some of the things that have been that have been portrayed in the Colombian media for the past 2-3 decades. And I would like you to share with us what are your findings and how that has, in a way, shaped our culture as we live it today.
It's absolutely fascinating, Marisol. We, Starlight Runner joined with Out of the Blue, and one of the first things that we need to know when we are engaging in a population transmedia implementation is context. Where do the people come from? What has been happening socially and politically and economically to the people? But among the most fascinating is, how do they see themselves? What is their reflection? And their reflection is represented in media. This story, which dates back to the 1980s, is an analysis. This paper that we've been using is an analysis of Colombian popular culture from the 80s, 90s, and aughts, and it's absolutely fascinating.
Is there any chance that we could use Transmedia to set some entrepreneurs as role models in Colombia?
Well, one of the major findings of this pop culture paper that analyzed the television and music and other cultural aspects of Colombia is that for a long time, entrepreneurs, businessmen, were depicted as villains or as outlaws. In the 1980s, if a businessman came to town, it means that he was trying to rob the people in El Campo, the countryside. More recently, you had outlaws who were entrepreneurs, but of course it's drugs and things like that, which is a negative impression of the entrepreneur, the businessman. We know that there is a hesitation in Colombian culture to stand up and say, hey, I'm a success, here's how I achieved my success, and this is something that is a good thing. I can have what I want. I can give back to my community with my success. Why? Our findings in the work that we've been doing here in Colombia are that it's discouraged to be so successful because it could almost be dangerous, or it was in the past. We feel it is less dangerous now to be successful, but the psychology is resting in the past. We need to bring that psychology forward. How? By encouraging many of the successful Colombians all at the same time to stand up and say it is okay to be successful. It is okay to make money. It is okay to create businesses that are going to strengthen this country and make it a player on the global scene.
So iNNpulsa is doing this project with you, actually in the area that I lead, which is mindset and culture. And when we began discussing about it, we thought of changing culture through this project and starting to look into possible narratives that we could share with others, and with them inspire them to actually start that path of innovation and entrepreneurship. How far do you think we are from that? And what's your expectation of this project we're doing together?
I actually am excited about the possibilities in Colombia. Sometimes when we're brought into a population activation, there are deep problems that extend back for the population hundreds of years. There are countries that have been the subject of terrible abuse for long periods of time. Colombia, the issues that are at hand are a little bit more recent, 30, 40 years. And so it is not so deeply ingrained in the population that they won't change at all, or that it will take many years to make such change. I think that there is an excitement in the youth of Colombia, and there is a vibrancy in the technological infrastructure of Colombia that will be conducive to getting young people to think of entrepreneurship and innovation as aspirational. To do this, though, we're going to have to tell stories that show them what the consequences, the positive consequences of such aspirations can be. So the work we have to do now is to locate a community of interest, people who will benefit from this attitude and help us to generate the content that will be easily accessible by the audience.
What have you seen in the Heroes Fest? What are your thoughts on that?
One thing that has been particularly impressive about the Heroes Fest is the audience. They are extremely attentive. They are taking notes. Heroes Fest was a trending #3 on Twitter yesterday, which was fantastic. And the response has been overwhelming. In other words, there are speakers who, if they make themselves available to the attendees, they are surrounded, and there are many questions asked, and they're smart, intelligent questions, which is fantastic. And that's extremely encouraging to me. Again, it is an indication that it's not too big a leap to give them a little push so that they can fly.
Can you tell us about any project that you have led, it doesn't have to be here, but somewhere else, that has been related to culture change?
Wow, let me think of what I can talk about. We have worked with, well, there's a city in England called Bath, and Bath is an ancient city, and it's very quiet, a little bit sleepy, and they came to us and said, you know, we'd like to kind of modernize, we'd like to join the 21st century, we'd like to show the world that Bath can be very with it and hip, in addition to having these historic sites. And we worked with them to understand what the ramifications of doing that were, because the reason they weren't doing it was that their population kind of liked it quiet, you know. And so we had to get specific about the narrative of Bath. We had to understand that this was not about turning Bath into Party City. It was about making them understand that there were colleges in the area that specialized in technology. And so you want to attract a high caliber of young person to those colleges, and that meant wiring Bath, making the technological infrastructure supportive of young people, and bringing in culture, bringing in arts and music and things like that. And at the same time, making sure that the people within Bath got to tell their stories. And that made them happy. Instead of being resistant, they said, oh, you mean you can go to a kiosk and press a button and see me, and I can tell my story about my farm or my home and the historic elements? And we said yes, and they did this. And now there is a revival in Bath. It's really wonderful.
Wow. Thinking about that, how do you think we can encourage more entrepreneurs and innovators to tell their stories, and why is that important to the vibrant culture of innovation and entrepreneurship?
Well, if we just have a leisure society in Colombia, a society that is celebrating the fact that there is no longer war, and that crime is going down, it's not going to get us anywhere in Colombia. We need for these young people to become competitive, to become entrepreneurs and innovators. To me, the best way, and there are many, but the best way is going to be heroes, is going to be role models. People who stand up and say, I did this, I realized my dreams, and I faced adversity to be honest and authentic about the difficulties of doing that in Colombia. We have to be real, you know. But tell the story with all the warts, with the difficulties, and show people that the adventure is worth it. Because there's success, you can have what you dreamed of having, but also in the process, I hope, you're helping to improve the community and make Colombia a better place. Once they tell their story, people will follow. And that's real leadership. Leadership breeds leadership, I think.
I get this question asked a lot. I kind of don't like it, but since I can't answer it, I want to ask it to you.
Oh, thanks.
And people ask me, how long is it going to take us to change culture? And well, it's not a recipe, it's not something that we can anticipate right now, but from what you have seen and from what you know that lots of people are doing, among them iNNpulsa and all its team, when do you think we could start seeing a change, or at least a shift in our cultural aspect?
My company, Starlight Runner, has an amazing ability to glean truths from data. And there's a lot of data that you supplied to us, and we appreciate that. We love data. We're nerds. The beautiful thing here is that there is evidence in this data that we're not too far away, that the change is not many, many years in the future, but just a few. There is evidence that that there are young people who are dreaming a little bigger. I think that the president of Colombia has to consider the power of the peace process, for example. And people think, how is one thing related to another? But we need to feel that at least an effort is being made to create an atmosphere that is conducive to creativity, that is conducive to good business, the knowledge that all sides will benefit from innovation and entrepreneurism. And that peace process is symbolic of that hope and that aspiration. So we see evidence, and there are people who would say contrary. There are people who would argue with us. Don't let them tell you that. You have to believe that it is going to be soon. There is evidence that we see as such.
You just reminded me of something that Khalid Alali was sharing with us also here in the Heroes Fest. And actually his presentation was permission to believe. And he thought that one of the biggest barriers or challenges that we have as a society is that we don't believe we can. How do you think we can take advantage of all these techniques to power that belief system in ourselves here in Colombia?
There's no magic. There's just proof. And multi-platform communication just puts the proof in our face no matter where we turn. And when you prove it so much, you start to think, maybe it's possible. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Any final thoughts that you would like to share with iNNpulsa community? It's just been a wonderful visit. I love coming to Colombia. I am a big believer in the youth of Colombia, who can rise and find themselves in a position of efficacy and power, diversity and equality, both within the country and as the country expresses itself to the rest of the world. But the one thing I have to say is, you must tell your story. You must tell your story. There is misperception about Colombia in the rest of the world. I say, oh, I'm going to Colombia, I'm happy. They say, be careful. You know, come on, guys. That's not the truth of Colombia fundamentally, but without the story to be told,
every way that you can do it, every platform that you have access to, telling your story will help the world understand that, that Colombia is as beautiful and formidable and filled with possibility as I know that it is.
Thank you so much, Jeff.
Oh,
it's
thank
been
you.
a really, really, really pleasure to have you.
Fantastic. Great to work with you,
Thank you.
Marisol.